when you try to apply reason that works in other areas of life to addiction, you are going to keep coming up confused.
Mm.
Hello, how are you?
Hi.
You
I'm
hanging in
doing well.
there?
I am hanging in there.
We're gonna attempt to record a episode. But Emily's a little under the weather. She's just coming out of having COVID.
Yeah, and it is everything that they say it is. It's fucking
Is
rough,
is this the
man.
first time you've had it though?
This is the first time I've had it like this, like with the
Okay.
full brain fog, the loss of taste and smell is really fucking weird. Um
Uh-huh.
yeah, like those like quintessential COVID symptoms. I This is the first time I'm experiencing
Yeah.
all that. Yeah.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
I appreciate you being here. We'll see if we
Yeah.
can get through it.
We'll get through it without me
Maybe
like
you'll have
coughing
all
into
kinds
the
of
mic too much.
yeah, maybe we'll have I don't know, maybe you'll have all kinds of weird thoughts because you're all delusional. It'll be great.
It's just gonna it's yeah, I just feel so dumb. Like that's what I was saying before we started this podcast. I'm like, I cannot begin to tell you how stupid I feel right now. It's just like the start of thoughts and then that's it. They don't go anywhere. I can't finish them. So
Well,
we'll try.
so kind of what we decided to do because of that is an episode we've been meaning to touch on. For well, there's two actually, and we can kind of talk about both.
Mhm.
One because like I would say my biggest struggle in life is addiction, and we've had some questions about that. So
Mhm.
we talked about that, but another one we eventually are going to do is really hashing out what we mean because we kind of throw around the word religious trauma a lot. And that is, I would say, your biggest like struggle that you've kind of grappled with in this life.
Right.
um yeah, you have any thoughts on
Yeah.
that?
I feel really excited to talk about these things. I do feel like we've both been grappling a little bit with kind of how heavy they feel because I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
our hard things. But that's kind of we've been I don't know, I feel like we've been really brave with this podcast in diving in, like not shying away from diving into those hard things. And the thing is like the thing I keep finding over and over again from doing this podcast is just like realizing again and again how not alone we are in
Mm-hmm.
these struggles that we've gone through and the issues that we've dealt with, and how there's so many people out there
Totally.
that are like actively in it, have experienced it, like, and I think just normalizing talking about uh yeah, the hard things. And I think we do it well with like talking about heavy hard things but still making it
Yeah.
you know
Yeah,
palatable, I
totally.
guess.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a couple of things came up for me while you're saying that is one, these conversations with you have always felt really good. I think because you're really good at I guess holding space for me. I know it's kind of like an overused phrase, but um like loving those like dark parts of me. Um and but also like I don't think that we've ever really like fully had an intentional conversation even about addiction really. So that'll be interesting to do that. And I think yeah, I don't know, one of the things that comes up is we were talking about I think it was when that comedian was making dead mom jokes.
Oh,
And you were
yes.
like and I was like, "Oh, no. How's Emily gonna react?" Like, I was so just like, "Ooh." When you're in the room and comedians, like, going into a topic that you know is, like, relevant to the person, like, right next to you, and you're like,
Right,
"Oh, no.
right.
Oh, no. How is
Mhm.
she is this okay?" And what you came out of that saying was, like, it felt cathartic to, like, just, like, laugh, and then you had mentioned uh, sometimes what can be painful about our painful stuff is that people shy away from talking about it. Like they're
Yes.
like they don't know what to do, they don't know what to say. And so their reaction to your pain is eek, that's too much. I don't know what to do. I don't have the tools for it. So I'm just going to kind of like ignore, pretend like it doesn't exist. But that in and of
Yes.
itself is actually really painful
It's so
because
painful. It's so dismissive of your pain when people it's this weird misconception that people think that if they bring up your hard thing or they bring up somebody brings up the fact that my mom's dead, that it's somehow gonna remind me of my pain, as if I've like forgotten that my mom is
yeah.
dead. And it's just kind of like I haven't, you're not reminding me of anything. Like it is always there and it always exists. And to have
Mhm.
somebody acknowledge it and be like, I see you, that's hard. I don't know what to do or say, but can I just witness you and your pain? Is so
Mhm.
much better than being ignored. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, totally. But I really do think it comes from a place of not like knowing. Like I think
Right.
through
It's
my
I don't think it's
friendship
from
with
a bad
you,
place. Yeah.
no, totally, totally. I think from my like friendship through my friendship with you, I've like gotten so much better at that. I don't know because there's just like no model for it for me. Like when things were hard, I was consoled, like maybe physically, but like what to say and how to like navigate that. Um, I don't know. It's like a whole new thing, and I know I've gotten better at it. And now I don't, I used to get really uncomfortable when people would share really dark, hard things
Mm,
with me. I didn't know what to do with it. This is like probably 10 years ago. And now when I hear it, I feel actually like super like honored. I feel like that's also like overused.
mm,
I'm like, but I do, I feel really honored when somebody feels like I'm a safe enough space to like share some of that stuff with me.
mhm.
And then obviously there's times where like people just like overshare and you're like, whoa, you're being like
Mm,
steamrolled by,
yes.
really dark and hard stuff. Cause I think that there's the way to at least enter a conversation like that is like with just like asking permission, being like, is this good for both of us? Are we cool if we go there? And I
Yeah.
think that's like an important first step. But yeah, I'm always relieved when people ask me about like addiction and getting sober and stuff. I'm like, yes, please. Like, I'm happy to talk about it.
I feel like I have so many questions and I'm excited to get to like intentionally dig into this with you. I
Yeah,
guess how do you want to like tell like your
a little bit of
story
story.
story
Ugh.
first, and we could is that what you want to do, or do you want to keep it more in like conceptually talking about it?
No, we can talk about it because it's just that this is the first time I've done that. So I'm obviously a little like nervous because it's a very
Yeah.
like vulnerable, raw, like
Yeah, totally.
dark
I feel like
place.
I'm
But
nervous for you.
I
Yeah.
am nervous, I gotta admit. But it's not it's a nervous because it's like the first time and because it just feels really vulnerable, right? But as a whole, it always feels better to talk about it than to not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess like like general story is um so I guess I don't even like know where is the beginning. I think it's important to know. Actually, no, I'll just start with like as drinking became a problem, which is like when I started drinking. It was like
Sure.
pretty immediately like problematic.
Okay.
I remember the first time I got drunk, I had this like weird like idea that I mean I was young. I was like what in high school, 16, 17, and I remember thinking that it was like I don't know, like noble if you could like hold your own, like drink a lot and be able to like you know what I mean, like carry yourself
Sure.
well still. So I remember I think I had like 5 beers or something and I was puking. Like this is something that I've noticed that I think is different for me than some people is I actually think that my body like has a very different physical reaction to alcohol.
Okay.
I tend to like flush red, like my whole like chest will like turn red, my cheeks will turn red when I'm drinking. And I've actually like looked into it's actually a lack of an enzyme that processes alcohol.
Oh,
um
interesting.
yeah, and it's like very common in like Asian communities, um
Yes. Okay.
some like Native American communities I think, but it's like a thing. And so uh yeah, so and then, like, my freshman year of college was the first time I really, like, was able to just, like, be free range and drink as much as I wanted, and that was just one of the that was, like, like, an actual, like, disaster year. I was so, so depressed and anxious, and it was weird because I thought that it took me a really long time to figure out that my depression and anxiety was, like, largely because of alcohol,
Mm.
funny enough. Um, but I mean, my freshman year of college, it was also weird because I was vice president of like the student of our class. I
Mhm.
was very productive. I got decent ish grades, but I was like sleeping till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, waking up, and then like going out and partying. Also, the school I was at was like very much like that's kind of all there was to do, was in the middle of Illinois and like a cornfield. It was like
Okay.
just like fraternities and sororities. And so after my freshman year of college, I was in such a bad place that I was like, I don't want to go back. Like I knew I couldn't go back. I was like, that place is I like, and I blamed it on the place. That's a very common thing. So
Okay.
I blamed it on the place. And then actually I ended up, my family kind of stepped in and was like, we think you have a problem, and did an intervention on me, which I
Oh,
think
wow.
was horrific and awful. And I'm very anti intervention
Okay.
from that experience. And I at the time was just like, this is ridiculous. I'm like an 18-year-old trying to figure out life in like my freshman year of college. Um, and actually, I went to a rehab, um, and like at that rehab, it was kind of reinforced that idea. Like so many of the people like in the rehab were like, not quite sure how you ended up here. You seem just like
Huh.
a young teenager who like is drinking too much in college. Not necessarily that you have like a problem, which
Right.
honestly was a problem because it took me a lot longer to get sober because I like latched on to
That was
that
your
and was like,
excuse.
yeah, I'm
Okay.
just like a girl trying to figure out how to like not drink too much because I'm drinking for the first time in my life. A lot of people go
Right.
through that in college, right?
Sure.
Um, and so I was very angry at my family, very resentful of like them doing the whole intervention thing. And I gotta say, something that kind of like came to light for me during that time was, so my dad, when I talk about my dad, is actually my stepdad. And he's raised me though, so I don't call him my stepdad. I don't even think of him as my stepdad. The only time it kind of comes up is usually when I'm talking about alcohol, because my
Mm.
biological father is an alcoholic, and like has gotten into had it's like, I mean, he's sober now and has been sober for I think like decades at this point. But when he was actively drinking, which is when I was like a baby, um it was really bad, like car
Right.
accidents, like just like really 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 bad. And so I started to realize that I think my parents kind of always had a fear that I would
Mm.
also be an alcoholic, and it really colored the way they treated me. And so
Mm.
as I was like going through all this, I was starting to like recognize that, and kind of in some ways I was angry because I felt like they had created like a self-fulfilling prophecy, and that's why they were so quick to
Right.
like jump on it and be like, we need to do an
Right.
intervention, we got to put her in rehab. And I was just like, I don't know, I was just really 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 angry at my family for a lot of that.
Wow.
And I mean, because the intervention was brutal. Like, they literally, because I was like, I'm not going to rehab right now. I'm going to finish out the semester of school and then I'll go to rehab if that's what you
Mm.
guys want. I had like a few months left. And the intervention, like, way is that if you don't go right in that moment, your family stops talking to you until you do.
Right.
So there was like months actually where, and they cut you off like financially. So I was in college. So my dad was helping me a little bit with like, food and stuff like that. And so they literally like my whole entire family stopped speaking to me for months. And they also cut me off financially, which I was like, fine. I just like got a job. Actually, yeah. But like I was super angry because I was just that I just like don't think that it's like a kind or a right way to go about that. I'm sure
Yeah.
in some situations it is the only option, and that
Right.
makes sense to me. But in my case, I was like, this is absolutely ridiculous. And I still kind of think it was ridiculous.
Like,
I'm
they,
not
like, skipped
angry.
so many steps between
Yeah.
where you were and yeah,
Yeah.
wow.
Actually, we can stop there. I don't know if you have any questions. It keeps going.
Well, why don't you keep going and then maybe we can because I do have questions, but why don't you keep going and then we'll go, like, through it again or something like that, or I'll just, like, ask questions.
So there was that. Again, like right now, I have zero resentment in my heart or anger in my heart for my family. I
Mm,
know that they were trying to do like what they could, like what they were just they were scared.
yeah.
Um, and really, it's fine. But when people are like, "Should I do an intervention on my like daughter?" I'm always like, "Fuck no!" Like
Yeah,
strong feelings
wow.
on that one. I'm like, the
Right.
last thing an addict needs is to be like
Cut
removed
off
from
from
like
there.
love, care,
Right.
consideration. Like literally like the what why people like drink is because of like self-loathing. Like
Right.
it's just like perpetuating exactly what causes to people to drink. I don't I
Right.
really am open to hearing somebody who like and maybe interventions are done differently. Maybe like the way that mine was done is not how they're done. I honestly it's like something that I like it makes I have such like charged emotions around it. I don't know like much about it to be honest. But anyway, so I was sober for 2 years and it was easy. It was not hard and I mostly did it because I wanted my family to leave me alone. So in
Mhm.
college, I was sober for 2 years. Um and like I said it just like really wasn't that hard. And so because it wasn't that hard to stay sober because I just was like this is awful, this causes a lot of pain, I don't need this in my life. I of course was like obviously I like don't have a problem with drinking. I just stayed sober for 2 years and it like felt like
Right.
nothing. Um, and so I started drinking again because I was like, whatever. And for probably like 4 years, it really wasn't like problematic. I would occasionally have a night where I drank too much and like embarrassed myself, but it wasn't, it wasn't like, I don't know. It just didn't feel like that big of a deal. Then when I got divorced and like wanted a divorce, the thing is like when you're drinking and drinking is a problem for you, anytime there's like a a hard part in life, it becomes worse. Like
Right.
because it's your coping mechanism. It's like
Right.
so when I was going through my divorce, it was really bad because I was just like trying to like literally live in a state of being blacked out so I didn't have to deal with my reality. Um, so that was a rough period of drinking. Came out the other side, didn't really stop drinking then. And again, when like life was good, it wasn't as problematic. Also, like I
Mm.
just didn't relate to so many of the like tropes about alcoholics, like not finished like they always joke like oh alcoholics when people like get up from the dinner table and there's like wine left in someone's glass they're like oh my god, I can't believe I didn't finish that wine. Like that was never me. I was like
Right.
easily like didn't finish a drink if I didn't like the way it tasted. You know what I mean? I wasn't like just like pounding things. But what I did
Right.
have happen was when life was really hard. I mean, I would like a preference of mine would be to get wasted and to like not be in the world. So, you know, but I would latch on to all these things that was like, oh, see, I don't do that. I don't do that. I
Right.
don't do that. And so it took me a long time to decide like this is really a problem. I have to stop. But then what ended up happening was I actually put myself in rehab after, again, it just kind of getting worse. It was kind of like the end of like another partner I was with, our relationship. It was getting worse. And that's actually you were a part of that when I went
Yeah.
and decided to like put myself in rehab. And I know you were like kind of surprised. Um, it was at that point that I was like I was starting to like hide it. And also my spiritual like rock bottom was so bad, but also like physically, I was like physically addicted to it at that point. And I knew that the
Mm.
difference was because my withdrawals were insane. Like I started having like actual withdrawals if I wasn't like, having like a beer with lunch.
Wow.
Um and so that actually really scared me.
Mm.
I actually like called my parents and was like, "Okay, I'm finally like at the place where I think I need help. So yeah, so I went to rehab, and I actually went to rehab. It was like 30 days. I got out, and then I like, man, alcohol like is an addiction is like a really tricky thing. Like what I have come to believe is that your mind like definitely plays tricks on you. And as
Okay.
soon as I got out, I was like, okay, I'm going to be able to like manage it. And so I like I don't know, or I thought I was just gonna be able to like be sober like on my own. And very quickly I got out and I started drinking, and it was like right back to where it started. And I was like, fuck, this is like really, really, really scary. Um
Mm,
and so I just checked myself back into the same place. So I went like whoop, like right back to back, and then I stayed there for a longer period because I was like,
mm,
I cannot keep drinking. Or I was fully convinced at that point in time that if I kept drinking, I was going to die. I mean, I still am.
right. Yeah.
And another thing that people often say about like addiction, and I especially with alcohol, which I feel to be so, so true, because it's so hard. It's like you just think you're going to be able to like intellectualize your way out of it.
Right.
Like you're like, I'm a
Okay.
smart person, I'm a resourceful person. Like, why can't I just like wrap my brain around this thing? And the one thing that really like resonated with me and still resonates with me is that like even after a period of not drinking, which I had many 1 year sobers, 2 years sobers, like blah blah blah. And but every time I started drinking again, I started like how problematic it was exactly where I like left off. And
Yeah.
that was some sort of like phenomenon that I had heard people talk about, but it wasn't until I witnessed it in myself, especially like having a period of sobriety and then like picking like starting to drink again, and then just like immediately being into like, okay, well now I'm drinking constantly.
Wow.
How did that like happen? And so that, and they say it's like a progression, like it's a disease that like actually progresses, and like when you stop and like pick back up again, you start right back where you like left off.
Right.
And so it wasn't until I like witnessed that in myself that I was like, I could never drink again. um and yeah, it's been kind of a mind fuck.
Wow.
So that's my like story of like, I'm not somebody I think who just like kind of had a problem with drinking. I like really had I have a problem with like addiction and drinking. And yeah, that's kind of the
Wow.
story of how fucked up alcohol is for me.
Yeah. Well, so thank you. You did it. That you did it.
Wasn't that
Thank
bad
you.
actually?
Yeah, you did great. I guess like some like reflections or maybe thoughts that I have in my really dumb COVID brain um is just like and it seems like you had this journey of feeling like you were in control of it. Like, oh, I
Hmm.
can reason my way out of like these are all the reasons why I'm not an alcoholic, or can control it
Hmm.
because I am able to be sober. And and it was this journey from that to realizing no, it's actually this disease that is present, and it exists.
Hmm.
And I know you've said things to me before like this, that it exists outside of how we normally
Logic.
rationalize, and yeah, and how we think of the world logically, that this is the anomaly, and that once you accepted that that this
Yes.
isn't something to control or muscle, but that you really have to treat it as like how you treat it today, as a life or death thing. I don't know, is do you have like thoughts more on that
Yeah.
distinction?
Yes, because that's like I spent so much time like trying to understand it from the context. Look, I'm like I spend my life in personal development. It's my favorite thing is like
Hmm.
getting better, getting healthier, thinking through things, challenging beliefs, and like everything that we talk about as far as like, integrating parts of ourselves and
Right.
like seeing and like and once you understand why, then it won't have as much control over
Right.
you.
Right.
Things like that. I just tried to apply that to drinking and kept starting and stopping over and over again, applying like new techniques and new philosophies and new ways of approaching it. And I actually had a mentor. She said this to me because she's an entrepreneur. She's a an addict, and she was like, Sarah, you're doing so much like so many like mental gymnastics to try and
Mm.
like sort this thing out, but people before you have figured it out, and it's your like you're rejecting what they've figured out, which is
Wow.
that it is an anomaly and it falls outside of all of the things that you wish you could like figure out. Like keep as you keep trying to like figure this out, it will keep just like chipping away at your life and your
Mm.
dignity and your self-love and your self-trust. And she was like, but if you just accept that it's a fucking anomaly, you're gonna be able to like actually see it for what it is more clearly. And that
Mm.
for some reason was like one of the most important things anyone's ever said to me,
Wow.
because I was like, she's right. And then and like, does that belief keep me safe? 100%, because it's like the belief I needed to like put in place to be able to just be like, I don't understand this thing fully, but I do
Mm.
know that my life is 100% better without alcohol.
Wow.
And so like, why even fuck with it, like whenever I think about drinking, because it crosses my mind, I'm like, why in the world would I even fuck with that? Like,
Mm.
and and it's hard to get sober. Like getting sober is really hard. First of all, I got to a point where I had fucking physical cravings. I
Mm.
actually went on low dose naltrexone for the actual physical cravings. And I remember telling my dad about it because I was like, this is something I've never experienced before. This is how I know my drinking has gotten really bad. It's like every cell in my body was like, all you need to do is drink and you'll feel better. And I was
Wow.
just, it's so crazy to have your mind and your body like literally working against you. It honestly feels like a form of insanity.
Right.
It's scary because you're like, I I'm a crazy person. I remember distinctly walking down Asheville, like this, like by the Triangle Park, Patton Park,
Mm.
and there's a particular woman who is like clearly an alcoholic and like homeless who like lives there basically. And I would see
Mm.
her like in and out of what was that place called? The like sports bar place across from my old
Oh,
apartment.
yeah. Does it start with a it's the beer
Barley
garden, the beer
Beer
garden.
garden. I would see her in the beer garden, like getting drunk and then being on the street, and then like and I remember just like looking at her and being like that could be me. And
Mm.
like a deep knowing way that I had never experienced before. Because I was like, this is like that is like 100% gonna be me if I like don't stop drinking.
Wow.
Like that's how like serious it got and how serious it felt. But I really think that that's a gift, and that's actually why I don't think interventions are the best way. And again, I'm sure there are um, uh, um,
Exceptions to that,
exceptions,
yeah.
but I really think that you have to believe it in your bones to get to want to
Right.
be and want to stay sober.
Right.
And so anytime I've had so many people come up to me and be like, someone in my family is struggling with addiction. And I'm like, I hate to say this because I know how painful it is for you, but you have to let them struggle. You have to let them
Mm.
struggle. You have to let them be in pain. You have to let them find their own rock bottom and ask for help, because I just believe that that's like it's the only thing that gets people and keeps people sober. Can you be there for them? Yes. Can you say, I think you have a problem? Yes.
Mm.
Can you say, I'm here for you and ready to take you to rehab or treatment or an AA meeting? As soon
Mm.
as you say the word, I'll fucking do it for you so that they
Mm.
know.
Yeah.
Like, yes. But like, can you drag them to something and like hope that there's gonna like and the thing is like, yeah, maybe they'll go there, he'll hear something, it won't stick, but it will be important. So I'm not
Planted,
saying like give
yeah.
up on people. Yeah, like
Sure.
I'm not, but I'm just saying like in order for people to get sober, they have to like they
They
have
have
to
to
on some
want it.
level want it for
They have to
themselves.
want
Yeah,
it.
because it's like
Yeah.
fucking brutal. It's like,
Yeah.
and then the first year that you're sober is awful. Like, it's the
Right.
worst because everything is so uncomfortable. You're
Mm.
uncomfortable in your skin. You're like, usually you have like tremendous self-loathing. You are like, why would anyone want me to even be here? Like, that's
Mm.
literally how you feel. That's why people keep using, because you're just like, I'm an absolute piece of shit. Why? Like, what's the point of being sober? What's like, why would anyone want me here? Like, that's
Mhm.
why, like, I remember I went to rehab, and like, I don't know, just like with the friendships in my life, I was like, yeah, like they don't want to be friends with me anymore. It's fine. I get
Mm.
it. Like, that was like the story I had. I was like,
Right.
it's fine. I just like have to get sober. That's all I know. But I just like I was like, all my friends are like gone now.
Yeah. It's so
It was
sad.
sad.
Yeah. So there was all these
Yeah.
stories. I guess I'm curious if you want to elaborate on that the year after. So you got to the point where you admitted to yourself this is a problem and you wanted to get better.
Hmm.
And then that year after, all these like because I feel like we've talked a lot about the stories that we tell ourselves, and a
Hmm.
lot of yours are rooted in this particular story of yours. I'm so curious as to what are the beliefs that you clung to or agreements you made with yourself that kind of like kept your head above water in that year that you're saying after getting
Hmm.
sober that was so hard and that you were battling with so many stories. And I feel like just from
Oh my
knowing you and
gosh.
talking to you, so many of those most negative and harmful stories are rooted back into like this time and this part of you, this experience. And yeah, I guess I'm just curious, like, what were those belief systems that you, like, you're saying
Yeah.
friends, family, like, there was nothing, you're in a new city, you're like, your relationship ended, and it just like, there wasn't a lot for you to hold on to, but you held on to something. And I guess I'm curious to know about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. That's, I think, important, and also like interesting to think about in that way.
Mm,
So a couple of things. One, I really had a lot of anger that had to be sorted through. Quite frankly, specifically with like my family, I had been uh, sexually abused as a child, which was like not dealing with that in some way
mm,
was a big part of my drinking, but obviously I like didn't fully realize that. Um, and then yeah, just like honestly what you come to learn, because I eventually went through the 12 steps, which I think are fucking awesome. And my favorite part of like AA, I wouldn't say I'm like a big AA-er. I love AA. It took me a long time to get to that place because I was
mm,
also kind of raised, I think because of who my biological father was. There was a lot of anger and resentment around all alcoholics. And so
mm.
I grew up thinking they were like horrible people. Um, and that AA was a cult. So I like grew up with those beliefs.
Wow.
So obviously when I discovered that I also had this issue, I hated myself.
Right.
Um,
Wow.
like true self-loathing. Like we actually mentioned it on a previous one where it was like, what's your biggest, we and I didn't share it. It was like, what's your biggest, darkest like fear
Mm,
story that like comes up for you when you're in your deep, dark, scary place.
mm,
And I'll just share it because it's like it was the core belief that like kept me drinking. But it is like it does feel kind of scary to share. And that's that the world would be better off without me.
mm.
Um
Wow.
and so and my friends and my family would be better off without me. Ooh, gonna cry.
Yeah.
Okay. But that I don't believe it anymore. but it's like it was like so on repeat in my brain for so
Mm.
long. Like my first waking thoughts when I was drinking was like, how do I like off myself without like hurting anyone? Like, can I just like
Mm.
go to like some like remote island and like drown myself in the ocean and no one will ever find
Never
me?
come
Like I like
back. Yeah.
these were like all my thoughts.
Right.
Cuz I didn't want to like I don't know, like I don't know. It was just like I didn't want to like leave people with the pain of suicide.
Mm.
Um but I didn't really want to exist anymore.
Mhm.
So and I've talked about this before, but like a big thing that I think saved me was I was like I just have to live my life for future Sarah and have faith that if I like keep putting
Yes.
one step foot in front of the other and trying to like show up in a day to day like as the future version of myself who like actually likes herself and feels better about herself like
Mm.
would that I will eventually like embody that person
Yeah.
because my present was too painful. Like it's funny, I think about this a lot with like mindfulness and meditation. Like when you're in that place, like getting present is not like
It's
it's really
excruciating. Yeah.
hard
Yeah.
because you're
Wow,
like, my
that's such a good
presence
point.
sucks. Like, I
Yeah.
don't want to be fucking present. I want to be unconscious. Thank you very
Right.
much. Like,
Right.
um, and so for me, it was actually like focusing on the future because that seemed like it could be better. Because the past
Mm.
was too scary. The past made me like
Mhm.
have full body cringes.
Mhm.
And so future Sarah was what I called her in my mind. I was like, hey, what would future Sarah do? How would future Sarah act? um just like practicing grace for myself, pushing back on like some of the thoughts when they would come in, like the amount of like intrusive thoughts I had were just like, ugh, it's it was brutal. And then also having to accept it as this anomaly that I couldn't fix with my like traditional like or the personal development strategies that had served me so well. And then also realizing that like resentment and anger, unresolved resentment and anger is like that's the real enemy.
Mm.
And so much of like what the 12 steps kind of walks you through. I feel like everyone should do the 12 steps. I also
Yeah.
have my like some problems with the 12 steps like the but it's mostly like semantics.
Okay.
I feel like it could be updated. I think we talked about this before because they call things personal defects,
Right.
like your dark sides, the things that are less than. But you
Your
know
shadow.
how
Yeah.
we talk, your shadow, how we
Yeah.
talk about it, where it's like there's always like a positive side to that, or it's a protector. I think that's more helpful because, like for example, you mentioned vanity earlier. I actually like I take pride in my physical appearance and how I show up in the world. And so I think that protected me. Like I never had a DUI, I never really lost a job. Like I didn't have a like and actually but those are the things that kept me from getting sober for so long because I didn't have the like classical like when you check into rehab, they ask you like a series of questions and I
Right.
didn't like fit many of them
Wow.
because I was
Yeah.
so good at like managing it and
Right.
hiding it and um I was just a very like functional but I mean I like experienced DTs when I was withdrawing. Like there's no doubt that I was
Mm.
like a fucking like I am an addict and like struggled with that or experience addiction, I think is what I prefer to say because um yeah, I don't know. Those are some of the thoughts that came up,
Yeah.
some of the
That's
beliefs.
yeah, it's so interesting hearing you say that like all like all the things that prevented you from
Getting
like
sober.
yeah, that they were things that in other areas of your life were like good things and like
Helpful.
gifts
Yeah.
and yeah, like functional and helpful and like but they allowed you to be like, "See, I'm not actually an addict. Like this is proof."
Yeah.
And that's like
Mhm.
so wild to me like um
That's why it's
that
such a
like
mind fuck. Like
right.
addiction is such a mind fuck, and I hope that anyone who has somebody with an addict in their life like can take that away from this
Hmm.
because when you try to apply like reason that works in other areas of life to addiction, you are going to keep coming up confused. That is like
Mm.
one of my biggest takeaways.
Mm.
Um
Yeah,
so
because I know my own experience with like people in my life with addiction has been that. I'm 100% guilty of like trying to reason with it and think like something, and I think through my relationship with you, you're just like, you gotta trust me on this one. Like,
Yes.
it just fucking doesn't make sense. Okay. And I remember when you told
Yes.
that to me, and I was just like, there was something. I do feel like I kind of just fucking let go. I was like, of that part
Mhm.
of my own mind that was trying to make sense of the people's addiction in my life, which is so fucked up, and like, I'm sorry.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
like, I think, and I think like for people who have addictions in their life, like those, thinking that I know fucking anything like is so harmful. Like just thinking of all the ways like that even like your family or friends like didn't show up or didn't understand, and how harmful that is. And I guess, I don't know, I would love to hear from you your opinion of, actually, a few things I would love to know. One, I would love to know what your thoughts are, like the like the biggest misconceptions to you. And I know I feel like we've touched on some of them, but like the
This is
misconceptions
important.
where you feel like people are fucking off, and people who don't understand addiction and haven't experienced it. And what would you say like some of those things are?
Oh my gosh, so many. I actually think it would be helpful at some point for us to do an episode. And honestly, I feel like this can go into a part two. I don't know about you. I'm like looking at the
Yeah,
time, but
I'm down for
um
part twos.
so I recently became have a new friend in my life, and she is 5 years sober actually today. And when we talk, it's just like it's so like when two addicts who are self-aware and like healthy
Hmm.
have a conversation about addiction. I mean, we every time we talk about it, we are like
Mm-hmm.
crying laughing. And I remember telling her, I was like, man, there's just some like level of knowing that you have that like non-addicts like do not have. And she's like,
Mm.
yeah, I know, like it's just, and it's just like the way your mind works in relation to like alcohol or whatever your drug of choice is so fucking like just like different. I don't know how to so what I'm trying to say is it would almost be, I think, helpful for me to like banter with like another addict.
That
You know
would
what
be
I mean?
amazing. Yes, yes.
Dude, we she would be so good for this
Let's do
because
that.
she's a riot. And also, I don't know, like we've had a few conversations where it's been really healing for me. And honestly, that's the most healing part about AA meetings. Because we were telling like Ben about it, and I was like, honestly, if you find a good AA meeting, they're fucking hilarious and like a
Mhm.
riot, because everybody's just like, listen to this like fucked up shit I like I did and how my crazy ass brain works, right? And then it's like
Mhm.
you walk yourself through, I don't know, just like all the ways in which you try to like justify something to try and just like make maybe like having a glass of wine like okay, and all the fucking mental gymnastics you had to do to
Right,
get there,
right,
and how
right.
hilarious that is. Um but so going back to your question though, some of the biggest misconceptions, well, some of the misconceptions I feel like are classic. Like a lot, I feel like most people know, like one, people tend to think because addicts, the resulting behavior is so like harmful to the people around them. People tend to think it's like a moral failing,
Oh, wow,
or
okay.
that they like just have shitty willpower, or like why can't you just like stop?
Mm.
But the problem is usually there's underlying trauma. There's usually a major disconnect from themselves and from the world around them. There's usually some self-loathing that can
Mhm.
again come from like, sometimes oftentimes childhood trauma, or eventually from the drinking and use itself. Because like as
Right.
you use and you do something embarrassing, you're just like, yep, I'm a piece of shit. So
Mm.
like, you know Other misconceptions that people have, I think the big one for me, because it was also so scary because I knew how harmful it was like that personal development will help fix an at like, just like
Right.
personal
Yes.
development stuff will fix an addict and make them behave normally. And like that's so dangerous for me. That's why I get kind of like, I'm like, no, it doesn't work. It's an anomaly. Like, I know that. I know it because I've felt it, I've experienced it, I've lived it. It's very confusing. The phenomenon of craving, I'm actually so grateful to have had that experience towards the end because I hadn't had it before. But now I have so much more empathy for people, especially like with opioids and alcohol, because the
Right.
cravings that you experience are just like so fucking all encompassing and powerful. um yeah, it's like it's just so it feels like it's like a certain level of madness to have your
Mm.
body like trying to get you to do something that is so fucking harmful to yourself, and
Right.
feeling overpowered by it. Like you are overpowered by this thing. And so you're literally like, and it gets easier with time as the cravings wear off, but that first month, man, you're like literally like white knuckling it. Like all I have to do is just like not drink today. That's like
Right.
literally the only thing you can focus on. It's why it's like one day at a time. I mean, all the like mantras are like just one day at a time, just one day at a time, because you cannot do anything else. But
Mm.
like everything that you can muster to like not use. And then I think that like I don't know. I just think that if you have an addict in your life, you got to know that there's a ton of like self-loathing there. But also weirdly, like also a lot of arrogance. Like it's so funny. And that's like one of the things me and my friend were laughing about because it's like the fucking contradictions you live in when you're like actively
Right.
using because you kind of have to be able to like survive is
Okay.
hilarious. Yeah, I mean, those are some of them.
Yeah.
Dude, addicts hate themselves more than you hate them. It's like
Mm.
hands down. So if you have a like somebody who's actively using. So if you have an addict in your life, like I feel like you need to know that. Like you can
Yeah.
be frustrated and yes, they cause so much pain and hurt, but I promise like what's going on in their brain is 100% worse. Like
Mm.
it's so fucking dark in there.
Like
Um
that right there, it's so hard for people, and I am so guilty of this, to suspend my own fucking hurt feelings or opinions about whatever has happened to witness that, what you're saying, like the suffering
mhm.
that's actually happening right in front of me. And it's interesting that you brought up like the arrogance piece, because I feel like there are just so many layers of confusion where it can come across. I feel like I have with people in my life, it's come across as a very aggressive thing. And I haven't really seen that pain, but it's like, why would I be seeing that dark part, and I think I feel like I hope people hear that, like, I think it's so important, just for so many different reasons, to learn how to acknowledge your own shit, like acknowledge your judgments, your hurt feelings, whatever bullshit you're dealing with, and be able to like kind of put that aside, to see somebody in front of you, to see them in their pain. And I don't know, I feel like if families, if friends, if we were fucking better at that, um we would just be better at supporting each other, um
Mm-mm.
and truly like showing up for each other. Fuck. But yeah, I would really love to, I would fucking love to be a little like fly on the wall for the
Dude,
conversation between you and your friend.
she would be so good. She's so fucking funny and just like I don't know, we like cry laughing about just like addiction, which is like feels really cathartic to just like fucking laugh about it.
To
But I
laugh
mean
about it.
that's
Hmm.
the that's like one of the gifts of getting together and like AA and stuff like that. And I feel like I should circle back and say like I'm not like anti AA. I think AA is wonderful. I just like have I mean I participated in it myself. I wouldn't say I'm like super active in it right now. But I will say actually circling back, something that was like really harmful for me was rejecting AA and rejecting
Mm.
support and help to try and figure it out on my own. Like that's so classic. Like what a stereotype I lived into there. Um
Mm.
and when you can like get over yourself a little bit to be able to like walk into a room and hear other people share stories, it's like really just, I don't know, it's a really like beautiful community, especially in LA, man. AA in LA is like awesome.
Yeah.
I actually lost my train of thought. There was something I was going to say. What was the original question you asked?
I was I went on a little bit of like a roundabout talking about people suspending their own bullshit to truly like witness
Oh, I know
somebody
what I
in
was going to
pain.
say.
Okay.
Well, I think it's important to remember, especially if you ever like see someone actively using, it's like self-harm. It's like as if you were to see somebody like cutting themselves or like
Mm.
binging and purging or anything like that, you know?
Mhm.
It's like it's incredibly like, but to us, I think, or to people who um don't know how like dark it is when somebody's using, you just look at them and you're like, what are you doing? You know? Like
Just don't do it.
like what the fuck's wrong with
Right.
you? Yeah, just don't
Yeah.
do it. Um there was actually a movie called Beautiful Boy. Did you see that movie?
No, I know I is it with is Steve Carell in it? Okay.
Yes, I think it's
Yeah.
such an important movie. Fuck though. It's such a real like look into not only like addiction and how fucking illogical it is, but also into how much pain it causes people. Just watch that
Mm.
movie and like boo-hooed. So, yeah, I don't know. It's also like I think one of the gifts I could go into a whole thing about the gifts of like being sober actually. But one of the things that you really like come out of it with when you do like get sober and it feels like it's sticking is that you have to like clean up to stay sober and for it to feel somewhat easy. I had to like clean out my closet, meaning like go back to all the places that I had like resentment in my life and take a hard look at it. And that's what the steps
Mm.
are, essentially, are a big
Mm.
part of them is looking at your shit, owning your shit, which is really painful, especially in situations where you have a ton of resentment towards the other person, because you have to look at like, well, what happened? What did you do to create this situation? Because you had a part in it.
Right.
um and the gift that you have when you go through the 12 steps is you like are so much better at owning your own shit, and it doesn't feel as scary because you do it with the darkest scariest moments of your life, right?
Mm.
So like little shit day to day, it's like so much easier to be like, ah, yeah, sorry, my bad, like I did that, I own that shit. I need to own that shit. And like you just don't, at least for me anyway, and I'm sure this isn't true for everyone, but you realize how poisonous resentment is, and I don't really like allow it to exist in my life because I know that
Mm.
resentment is like th- probably the most poisonous emotion in my opinion.
Mm.
um and the most potentially harmful. So yeah, so you're just like so easy to like recognize it, to call it out, to make sure it doesn't like fester.
Mhm.
um and I think that's like, I don't know, it's hard, but it's like life on the other side is so much better.
Yeah. And
I feel like you have like a cheat code, honestly, being sober. I think
like
alcohol like really brings people down, even when it's not like they're not like, even when they're just having like a few glasses of wine every week. It's like as a chemical, it's so crazy what it does to your brain. I don't know. Anyway.
I feel like I had a thought or a question. I think what it was I was just hearing you when you were talking about how that the belief that kept you afloat, that pulled you through getting sober, was this idea of like believing in a future version of yourself that you liked.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
That liked
and
me.
that you liked, yeah, that liked
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
What that because that idea is something I've learned from you for sure. And it's so like that. Oh man, that like one fucking nugget I feel like is so integral, like so core to like even how the work that you're doing in the world right now, and like how you show up for people, and like it feels so fundamental that it's this you the small things you're doing right now, and believing in there's like there's a version of you out there that like loves herself and is happy,
Mm,
and has good relationships or whatever. And I guess I don't know, I would love to hear your reflections, like looking back at Sarah those years ago and who you are today, you know, because of
mm.
all of that. And like, and do you feel like, I mean, I feel like I know what my answer is, but do you feel like you're that future Sarah, you know, that you were so hoping for, you know?
Yeah. I mean, the future Sarah, I was hoping I am actually beyond what like
Mm,
my
fuck yeah.
imagination was capable at the time of,
Yeah.
actually.
Yes.
Um so that's cool. I've never really thought
I
about it in
mean,
that way till you just asked, but future me that I could imagine at the time was uh I don't know, I like surpassed that years ago.
yeah.
Um or even in just like the last 3 years maybe. And I'm in a I don't know, I'm a future Sarah that I couldn't have imagined,
Like, I
which is
mean,
cool.
that fucking whole thing, like the fact that you are you are experiencing and existing as a version of yourself that was so beyond like what you could even imagine at that time. Like how fucking hopeful is that? Like to people who are in pain and people who are struggling and suffering, that there's like a potential for like goodness and joy in your life that you can't even fathom right now, you know, and that your story is like proof of that. It's like so fucking beyond like beautiful and amazing.
It's one of the reasons I feel like I need to share this part of my story more, is because I remember when I was in the struggle for it, I was like, do I even want to get sober? Because like, is my life just going to always be a struggle and I will just be sober and struggling? You
Right,
know what I
right.
mean? And like I'm like that I think I'd like to keep drinking.
Yeah.
And I remember like distinctly like laying on the floor of the bathroom after like being really hungover. So I'm like puking because I'm so hungover. And I'm like Googling successful alcoholics because I just like,
Mm,
I needed to know. Well, first of all, honestly, going to some AA meetings were hard, especially in North Carolina and like the country. I didn't have a lot
yeah.
of people in those meetings that I related to. In LA, it's like
Right.
everybody looks like me. And you know what I
Mm.
mean? And it's not like they needed to like look like me, but I don't know. There's just like a
You needed to
country,
identify, sure.
yeah, an old country boy who's like, from living in Appalachia. Like I was just like, oh, this is my future. And so, yeah, I used to like Google successful alcoholics, and kind of the only real stories out there, I mean, or the easiest ones to find are like celebrities, which like
Mm,
don't really do it for me. You know what I mean?
right,
I was like, I kind of
right,
want to see like a businesswoman who's like
right.
overcome this. Uh or somebody who's like a philanthropist or like and it was kind of hard to find. There's so many more examples of men. And
Hmm.
so I don't know. I just think that's one of the like that moment, like thinking about Sarah like on the floor, puking her guts out, trying to find hope in other people is
Yeah.
one of the reasons I feel like I need to like talk about this more, cuz
Yes, yes, yes. Because who there
you
might be
need it.
somebody, yeah, out there on the floor listening to this podcast maybe, you know?
Yeah.
I'm like
And that's
I'm so
also one of
grateful. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah. And I will say that's one of the reasons I hesitate to share my full experience, especially around like AA in particular, because you're talking to a really vulnerable, I know I'm talking to or resonating with a very vulnerable population, and rejecting AA actually caused me a lot of pain. And so I
Mm.
worry actually about doing that. But I also think it's important to share my full story. Um, and so I'll kind of like, I guess, kind of sort to start to wrap up with this one story that was important was I remember the mentor I had and worked with was actually in Bali. And she happened to be there. And I was so excited because she was like a sober female entrepreneur, successful. And I
Mhm.
was like, finally, I'm going to work with somebody who's like, I don't know, somewhat where I want to be. Um, and I remember her like being all into AA and the 12 steps and her being like one of the reasons I like took it more seriously. And it was so funny because she told me this story about when she was getting sober and how she did the same thing. She rejected AA and the 12 steps and because she didn't want to be a part of that club because she had such
Mhm.
because you have your own ideas of what it's like. And
Right.
mine were horrible because I was raised being told that it was a cult and that it was like awful people and things like that. So like why would I want
Wow.
to be a part of that? It was a really harmful
Right,
belief
right.
that I had. And she told me a story about how when she first got sober, she went first to rehab and then I think to like a retreat center where she was just gonna like meditate. And it's so her story is hilarious because another thing that like happens when you're getting sober is you often go through kind of like a sugar addiction like phase because
Oh,
you're
okay.
actually like used to
Yeah.
consuming a bunch of sugar with alcohol
Right.
and you're also
Right.
like kind of a hot mess and like that's why people like chain smoke and like pound coffee and like eat a bunch of sugar. That's like classic like freshly sober person.
Okay.
Because you're just trying to like get a fix
So
and you're
something.
so like you're just like such a fucking mess. And so she talks about how she's at this like meditation retreat trying to get sober without AA, without AA and the 12 steps. And she's like sneaking off from this like monastery retreat to like find a little street vendor who's selling, I think it was like like some sort of like sugar pancakes. And she's just like shoving them in her pockets and like eating these like
Yeah.
because she's like still like struggling to stay sober. And then she like talked to this like leader of this meditation retreat and she was like, okay, like what's the secret to staying sober? She's like in Asia somewhere, like she's gone to like great lengths to avoid AA.
Right,
And she's
right.
like, what's the secret to staying sober? And the guy and the like monk or whatever looks at her and is like, the 12 steps, it's
Yeah.
Alcoholics Anonymous. And she's just like, damn it.
No.
and so and so me and her had this running joke because she's the one who like got me to like brought me back to AA and the 12 steps. And she and I joke that she was my monk in the monastery in the like
Right.
in the rice paddies. I was
Yeah.
like, here I am in Bali, just desperately looking for anything that you're going to tell me that I can do anything but the 12 steps to stay
Right, right.
sober. And you're like, hey, babe. I was like,
Yeah, wow.
so I think
Mm.
it's really funny. And I also wanted to leave it with that because it's it is what ultimately got me sober.
Mhm.
But I obviously have my own like thoughts around some of that, which is like classic addict like
Okay.
disagree
But here are
with the
my
thing, the
notes.
very thing that saved your life.
Here's
Right,
my
to be like,
critiques.
yeah, yeah, but I could have done it better. It's like so classic.
Wow. Wow.
um
Yeah.
so
Mm.
yeah, that was good. I'm glad we like kind of got it because I feel like we've just kind of touch on it and I'm excited to do it for you and religious
Yeah.
trauma, so
Yeah. Yeah.
to like
Well,
hash it out.
I don't know. I just want to acknowledge like yeah, I'm so fucking glad you're here and you're my
Oh,
friend
thank you.
and and that you like that you just kept fucking going so that I could be BFFs with that future Sarah. And like, I don't know. I love you so much. And your story is so fucking powerful. And I know it's going to like inspire people and give people hope and encourage people. And I'm so grateful for your vulnerability today. And I just want to acknowledge that in you. And I just love you.
I love you. It feels good to be in a place where I can share it, you know,
Yeah.
because that's a level of healing. Uh,
Yeah.
it's you have to be, I think, at a certain place or a certain kind of person to be able to like to share.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I love you.
Definitely. I love you.
Till next time.
Till next time.